Right now, scientists can watch your brain make a decision before you know you've made it, which raises an uncomfortable question. If your brain already decided, who's actually deciding? I'm Ahmed from the MindGlitch TV. I used to think free will was obvious. I choose what I eat, what I say, who I am. Then I read about an experiment that made me a lot less sure. And weirdly, the same question is showing up somewhere else entirely, inside the AI systems we talk to every day. So let's look at both. In 1983, a scientist named Benjamin Libet ran a strange experiment. He asked people to freely decide, at a moment of their choosing, to move a finger while hooked up to a brain scanner. He wanted to know, when does the brain start preparing the movement versus when does the person consciously feel like they've decided? The brain activity started about half a second before the movement, but people only became consciously aware of deciding about 0.2 of a second before moving. The brain, it seemed, was already acting before the person felt like they'd chosen anything. That result has haunted the free will debate for over 40 years. And it got worse. In 2008, researchers in Germany used brain scanners to go further. They had people freely choose to press a button with their left or right hand and found they could predict which hand a person would choose up to 7 seconds before the person felt they'd decided. A few years later, another team pushed it to 11 seconds, using computer pattern recognition on brain scans to predict choices before the person was even aware they were choosing. 11 seconds. That's not a decision. That's a headline. Here's the part almost nobody hears about. Because a few years after that first famous experiment, other scientists went back and asked, what if we're reading this wrong? In 2012, a team proposed that the brain activity before the decision isn't a decision being made in advance at all. It might just be random noise. Your brain's activity naturally drifts up and down all the time, and when that drift happens to cross a certain threshold, a movement gets triggered. Average enough of these random drifts together afterward, and it looks like a slow, deliberate buildup, even though no single moment was actually a plan. And it gets even more interesting when you change what's actually being decided. One study had people choose between two options in two ways. Once for something totally arbitrary, and once for something real. Which of two charities would receive an actual $1,000 donation? That telltale brain decided first signal? It showed up clearly for the trivial choice. For the meaningful one, the one that actually mattered to the person, it was gone. Read that again. The more a decision actually mattered, the less it looked pre-decided. One researcher who's spent years on this described the original interpretation like this. We may be passengers in a self-driving car, watching the road and thinking we're steering. But his own more recent work complicates even that. In his latest study, that classic brain decided first signal didn't line up with what people actually intended to do at all. 40 years later, and the scientists who study this closest are the ones saying, it's not settled. Simple question. Do you feel like you're actually choosing your life, or does it just feel that way?
Honestly, every single day. I decide what stall to buy from, what to cook, who to call. That's choice. If a machine could predict what I'll pick, fine. It still feels like mine when I pick it.
I used to think that too. But the older I get, the more my choices look like patterns. My mood, my habits, what my parents did. I don't know anymore where me choosing starts and what shaped me ends.
At my age, I've made the same coffee order for 20 years. If that's free will, it's a very boring kind.
Follow-up. If scientists proved completely that your next choice could be predicted before you make it, trying your make it enactable before you make it, would that change how you live?
No, I'd still feel like I'm choosing. That feeling's not going anywhere just because someone has a graph.
Maybe. I think I'd start asking why more before I act, instead of just assuming my reasons are really my own.
Depends who's doing the predicting. If it's a scientist, interesting. If it's an app trying to sell me something, that worries me more.
3 people. 3 completely different instincts, which, honestly, is where most of the actual experts land too. Here's the twist almost no one brings up when this topic goes viral. You'd assume that the people who study this for a living, professional philosophers, mostly think free will is dead. Science proved it, case closed, right? The largest survey of professional philosophers ever conducted found the opposite. Fewer than 1 in 9 reject free will outright. Almost 60% hold a position called compatibilism, the idea that even in a fully deterministic universe, where everything that happens is the result of what came before it, free will and determinism aren't actually in conflict. Their argument, roughly, free will was never about breaking the laws of physics. It's about whether your actions come from your own reasoning, your own values, without someone forcing you at gunpoint. One philosopher put it well. He compares free will to something like an economy or an ecosystem, built entirely out of physical, deterministic parts underneath, and yet real at its own level with its own rules. His test is simple. Can you act on your own intentions? Do you have genuine alternative possibilities? And do you actually cause your own actions? If yes, he says, that's free will. No violation of physics required. And here's where it stops being just a science question. Every time an AI chatbot writes a reply, it's doing something oddly similar to what your brain might be doing. It scores every possible next word by probability, then picks one. Turn that randomness all the way down, and it becomes almost entirely predictable. Same input, same output every time. Turn it up, and the exact same question can produce a completely different answer, which means even a machine built entirely out of deterministic math can behave in ways that look, from the outside, like it's genuinely deciding. Here's the part that actually stopped me. Researchers built a tool to trace, step by step, how one of these AI systems arrives at an answer. And they found something strange. When writing a poem, the system appeared to quietly pick the rhyming word it was going to land on several words before it actually wrote its way there. It was planning ahead. And the team that built this AI, that trained it, that runs it, even they admitted their own tracing tool only captures a fraction of what's actually happening inside. The people who built the system can't fully explain why it chose what it chose. Sit with that for a second. A fully deterministic machine, built entirely from math its creators wrote, and they still can't tell you exactly why it picked one word over another. That's not so different from a brain built entirely from neurons that still can't quite tell you why it picked one choice over another. Remember that philosopher's 3-part test? Act on your own intentions, have genuine alternatives, cause your own actions. He's said openly that if a machine ever meets those same 3 conditions, by his own logic, it would qualify too. Same rule book. No exceptions for silicon. So, is free will an illusion? Here's my honest answer. Nobody actually knows yet. Not the neuroscientists, not the philosophers, not the people building AI. What we do know is this. The story is a lot more complicated than science proved you're a puppet, and a lot more interesting than obviously I just choose things. The story is a lot more complicated than science proved you're a puppet. So today, try this. The next time you make a decision, even a small one, pause for 1 second and ask, where did that actually come from? Was it really you weighing it, or a pattern running on autopilot? You don't need an answer. Just noticing the question is the point. Because whether or not you fully control your next choice, you can absolutely control whether you examine it. If this made you rethink even one decision today, like this video, share it with someone who loves a good argument. Comment what you think. Free will, no free will, or somewhere in between, and subscribe for more of these. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for watching the MindGlitch TV. Next time, why some videos won't let you stop watching, even when you want to.